The hushed silence of the packed arena erupted into a deafening roar as 12-year-old Isabella smoothly slid off the back of Lightning, the black stallion that for decades had shattered the dreams and pride of hundreds of cowboys, and walked to the center of the arena. The animal followed her docilely, like a gentle giant surrendered to her small hand. But to understand how a girl with hydrocephalus achieved the impossible, we need to go back 6 months, to when the golden hues of autumn began painting the hills of Oakhaven, and Mayor Anthony Miller took the stage in the town square, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "My fellow citizens," he said, adjusting the microphone as men in hats gathered curiously. "For 23 years, the horse Lightning has been the symbol of our resilience. No one has ever been able to tame him." He paused dramatically. "Therefore, I propose a challenge. $1 million to anyone who can ride and control this animal for 5 minutes in the main arena during the Winter Festival." The ensuing buzz echoed through the saloons, the modest homes, and the distant farms. Men looked at each other with fire in their eyes. Women sighed, knowing their husbands would return home with dangerous ideas in their heads. But no one paid attention to the frail girl who, sitting in her wheelchair beside the bandstand, raised her small hand and said in a crystal-clear voice, "I accept the challenge." Isabella Miller was 12 years old, her head slightly larger than other children her age. Hydrocephalus, diagnosed at age 3, had shaped not only her appearance but her way of seeing the world. While other children ran through the fields, she observed. While they shouted, she listened. While they competed, she understood. Her father, Louis Miller, a 50-year-old man with calloused hands and weary eyes, felt his heart pound when he heard his daughter's words. 20 years earlier, he himself had tried to tame Lightning. The result was a fall that broke 3 ribs and shattered his pride. Since then, he'd worked as a ranch hand on other people's farms, carrying the weight of abandoned dreams. "Isa, my daughter," he said that night, sitting by her bedside, "this horse is no joke. Men twice your size have tried and failed because they tried to dominate him," Isabella interrupted, her dark eyes shining with a wisdom that seemed disproportionate to her age. "Dad, I don't want to tame him, I want him to accept me." The difference between those two words, dominate and accept, was the chasm that separated Isabella from all the other challengers. During the weeks that followed, as cowboys from all over the region arrived in the village to study the legendary horse, Isabella began her own preparation. Lightning lived in a fenced pasture on the outskirts of town, a magnificent animal with black fur that shone like jet under the sun. His eyes were wild, but Isabella noticed something the others didn't. It wasn't just wildness, it was fear. Deep, ancestral fear that turned every human approach into a battle. Every morning, before the sun fully rose, Isabella asked her father to take her to the pasture. Louis hesitated, but he couldn't deny his daughter anything. There, she would spend hours observing the animal, studying its movements, its breathing, the way its ears moved when it heard different sounds. "You're afraid," she would murmur, leaning against the wooden fence. "I'm afraid sometimes too, afraid that people will look at me and only see what's different, not what's the same." Lightning watched her from afar, keeping a safe distance. But Isabella noticed that day by day he would approach a few inches closer. Not out of curiosity, but out of something deeper, recognition. Meanwhile, the village buzzed with the arrival of competitors. Cowboys from the Pantanal, tamers from Rio Grande do Sul, even an American who claimed to be an expert on wild horses arrived. They all followed the same strategy: force, intimidation, special equipment to break the animal spirit. Isabella watched the training sessions with growing sadness in her heart. She saw men with whips, ropes, spurs. She saw Lightning thrashing about in increasing fury, his eyes becoming wilder with each attempt at forced approach. "They're making it worse," she told her father one afternoon as they drove home after another day of observation. "Every time someone tries to force him, he remembers why he started to be afraid." Lewis looked at his daughter through the rearview mirror. "How do you know he's afraid? Everyone says he's just brave." "Because I recognize fear," Isabella replied. "When you spend your whole life being different, you learn to recognize when someone feels threatened." That's when Isabella decided to change her strategy. Instead of just observing, she started talking to Lightning. Every morning, she arrived at the pasture and simply stayed there, in silence, breathing at the same rhythm as the horse. When he became agitated, she remained calm. When he approached, she didn't make any sudden movements. When he moved away, she waited patiently. "What are you doing?" asked Peter, one of the local cowboys, finding her there one foggy morning. "I'm telling him I'm not a threat," Isabella replied, without taking her eyes off the horse. Peter laughed. "Girl, you're 12 years old and weigh 90 pounds. Of course you're not a threat." "Not physically," said Isabella, "but I could be an emotional threat. I could try to change him, control him, make him something he's not. That's what everyone else is trying to do." The girl's words touched Peter more deeply than he expected. He himself had tried to tame Lightning years before, using all the traditional methods. He had failed, like everyone else. "And what will you do differently?" he asked. "I'll wait for him," Isabella said. And so, week after week, Isabella built a routine of patience. She brought pieces of apple, not to lure the horse, but to leave them by the fence, as an offering of goodwill. She hummed softly, songs her grandmother had taught her, gentle melodies that seemed to calm not only Lightman, but all of nature around them. For those who follow stories of overcoming and transformation, subscribe to receive more touching accounts like this, because sometimes it's in the most improbable achievements that we find the deepest lessons about the power of empathy and patience. Gradually, Lightning began to accept her presence. First, he stopped shying away when she arrived. Then he started to approach when she sang. One day, to the astonishment of everyone watching, he ate an apple directly from her hand, his soft lips touching the girl's small palm with surprising gentleness. "My God," whispered Lewis, who had arrived to pick up his daughter. "He's never let anyone get that close." "Because nobody ever asked if he wanted to," replied Isabella, gently stroking the horse's muzzle. "Everyone just assumed he should accept." The news spread quickly through Oakhaven. The girl with hydrocephalus had accomplished what hundreds of strong men hadn't, gained Lightning's trust. Some came to see, incredulous. Others whispered that there was something strange, almost supernatural, about the connection between the girl and the animal. But Isabella knew there was nothing magical about what was happening. It was simple mutual recognition. Two creatures who had been judged by their appearance, labeled as different, finding solace in each other. "Do you know why he's afraid of being ridden?" she asked her father one afternoon, as Lightning grazed peacefully near the fence where she sat. "Why?" "Because the last person who rode him never came back. I looked it up, Dad. 23 years ago, Lightning's last owner was a man named Miguel Santos. He was known as the best rider in the region. One day, he went for a ride with Lightning and never returned. They found the horse 3 days later, alone, with the saddle still on his back." Lewis felt a chill. "How did you find that out?" "I talked to Mrs. Maria, who works at the courthouse. She showed me the old records." Isabella stroked Lightning's neck tenderly. "He's not vicious, Dad. He's grieving. He's been grieving for 23 years. The revelation changed everything. Isabella wasn't dealing with a wild horse, but with an animal that had lost its best friend and had never learned to trust again. Every attempt to tame him was a painful reminder of that loss. That's why he accepts you, Lewis realized. You're not trying to replace him. You're just offering friendship. Exactly, said Isabella. And that's what I'm going to do in the competition. I'm not going to try to tame him. I'm going to ask him to take me for a ride. The days passed quickly. As the winter festival approached, anxiety in the village grew. Bets were made, strategies were discussed in the taverns, and everyone had an opinion on each competitor's chances. Isabella continued her daily routine, but now Lightning actively sought her out. He came to the fence when he heard her voice, rested his head on her shoulder when she sang, and even allowed her to run her fingers through his mane. "Do you trust me?" she asked one morning, looking directly into the animal's dark eyes. "Do you trust me enough to let me get on your back?" Lightning snorted softly, as if considering the question. Then, to the surprise of everyone watching, he lowered himself slightly into a position that would make it easier to mount him. "I can't believe it," murmured Peter, who had become a regular observer of these encounters. "He's offering himself." Her heart pounding, Isabella placed her hand on the horse's back. Lightning remained still. Slowly, with her father's help, she climbed onto the animal's back, without a saddle, without reins, just with the mutual trust they had built over months. For a few minutes, they remained that way, still getting used to the sensation. Then Lightning began to walk slowly across the pasture, with Isabella on his back, his movements smooth and careful, as if he knew he was carrying something precious. "Thank you," she whispered, hugging the horse's neck. "Thank you for trusting me." The news spread like wildfire. The girl had ridden Lightning, not for 5 minutes, but for over an hour, riding calmly across the pasture while the animal seemed to dance beneath her. The day of the festival arrived. The arena was packed. People from all over the state had come to witness the impossible. Competitors lined up, each with their strategy, their equipment, their confidence. Isabella was at the end of the line, without special equipment, just a simple helmet and a blue dress her grandmother had sewn for her. She seemed even smaller next to the tall, muscular men who preceded her. One by one, the competitors tried. The American, with his scientific methods, lasted 17 seconds before being thrown. The champion from the Pontonal managed to stay on for almost 2 minutes before Lightning got rid of him with a sudden movement. Each attempt left the horse more agitated, more wild. When Isabella's turn came, a murmur ran through the crowd. Many questioned the sanity of the organizers in allowing a child with a disability into the arena with such a dangerous animal. "Are you sure, honey?" Lewis asked, kneeling beside her wheelchair. "I am," Isabella replied, with a confidence that surprised even herself. "He's waiting for me." And he was. Lightning, who had spent the last 20 minutes running in circles, snorting and rearing, stopped completely when he saw Isabella enter the arena. His eyes fixed on her, and something changed in his posture. Isabella didn't rush to him. She didn't shout, wave, or make any dramatic gesture. She simply walked to the center of the arena and waited. Lightning approached slowly, cautiously, as if asking if she was sure. When he reached her, he lowered his head, allowing her to touch his muzzle. "I know you're tired," she murmured, loud enough for her voice to carry across the silent arena. "Tired of being forced, of being judged, of being seen as something you're not. I get tired sometimes too." She stroked his neck. "But you don't have to carry this burden alone. I didn't come here to conquer you. I came to be your friend." Lightning snorted softly, a sound that seemed almost like a sigh of relief. Then, without her asking, without her forcing him, he knelt. The crowd held its breath as Isabella, with her father's help, climbed onto the horse's back. There was no saddle, no reins, just 2 souls who had found understanding in each other. "You can go," she whispered. "I trust you." And Lightning went, not running wildly, not trying to throw her, but walking with dignity around the arena, then trotting smoothly, then galloping with a grace that took everyone's breath away. They didn't look like competitors in an arena, but partners in a dance. Isabella moved with the horse, anticipating her movements, and Lightning responded to the slightest touch, the slightest shift in her small weight. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. The crowd had stopped counting the time and begun simply watching, mesmerized by the beauty of the moment. Finally, Isabella murmured something in Lightning's ear, and he stopped in the center of the arena. She slid off his back with the same grace with which she had mounted, and the horse lowered his head, allowing her to hug him. The silence that followed was louder than any applause. Then, slowly, one person began to clap, then another. Then the entire arena erupted in an ovation that seemed to shake the ground. But Isabella barely heard. She was focused on Lightning, whispering words of gratitude in his ear, letting him know that he had been perfect. "Ladies and gentlemen," said the mayor, his voice trembling with emotion, "we have our winner." But as the audience cheered and photographers rushed to capture the moment, Isabella noticed an elderly man approaching the arena slowly. He limped slightly, leaning on a cane, but his eyes were fixed on Lightning with an intensity that made her hesitate. The horse saw him too. His muscles tensed, not with fear, but with something that seemed like recognition. "Lightning," the man said, his hoarse voice thick with emotion. "My old friend." The horse approached slowly, cautiously. When he got close enough, the man extended his hand, allowing Lightning to sniff his fingers. "You remember me," he murmured, tears streaming down his wrinkled face. "After all these years, you still remember." Isabella looked between the man and the horse, slowly understanding. "You're Miguel Santos," she said, not as a question, but as a statement. The man nodded. "I am, and I owe you an explanation, girl. You and Lightning." In the days that followed, Miguel told his story. 23 years earlier, he had gone for a ride with Lightning when they were caught in a sudden storm. A bolt of lightning had struck near them, frightening the horse, which had run away. Miguel was found 3 days later with a broken leg and head injuries that left him unconscious for weeks. When he finally woke up in the hospital, he learned that Lightning had been captured and was being kept in the town's pasture. But Miguel had lost his memory of the events, and the doctor said he would never be able to ride again because of his injuries. "I was afraid to go see him," Miguel confessed, "afraid that he wouldn't remember me, or worse, that he would blame me for leaving him alone." "That's why he was afraid of being ridden," Isabella understood. "He thought you had abandoned him." "And I did abandon him," Miguel said, his voice breaking. "Out of cowardice, out of fear. For 23 years, I abandoned him." But Isabella had an idea. "Maybe it's not too late," she said. "Maybe he's waiting for you to forgive him." "Forgive me?" "No, Mr. Miguel. Maybe he's waiting for you to forgive yourself." And so, on a golden winter morning, Miguel Santos climbed onto Lightning's back for the first time in 23 years. It wasn't easy. His bones were old, his reflexes slow, but Lightning carried him with the same care he had shown Isabella. When they came down, they were both crying. 23 years of fear, pain, and separation had finally come to an end. "Thank you," Miguel said to Isabella. "You gave us back to each other." "No," she replied, watching Lightning graze peacefully. "You were always together. You just needed to remember that." The $1,000,000 prize changed Isabella and her family's lives. Louis could buy a small farm where Lightning came to live, visited regularly by Miguel, and serving as an example that even the most wounded hearts can learn to trust again. But the real prize, Isabella knew, wasn't the money. It was the lesson she had learned and taught everyone. The true strength doesn't come from dominating or controlling, but from understanding and accepting. That sometimes the greatest victory is simply allowing someone to be who they truly are. And every morning, as the sun rose over the green fields, Isabella and Lightning would go for a ride together, not as tamer and tamed animal, but as two souls who had found in each other proof that difference is not a weakness to be overcome, but a strength to be celebrated. The village was never quite the same. People began to look at those who were different with new eyes, remembering the girl who had taught a wild horse to trust again, and how she had done it not through force, but through patience, understanding, and unconditional love. And Lightning, who, for 23 years, had been known as the untamable horse, became a symbol of something far more beautiful: the possibility of healing, forgiveness, and second chances for all those who had lost faith in human kindness.